Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on what's really a very special occasion, a virtual tasting that we've been looking forward to for some time, years in the making, candidly, and one that we think is going to be really enjoyable. We know that the wines are fantastic, and we're going to taste three fabulous wines for the holiday table. But also some really good friends, and I think we're going to have a good time. We have GoGi Wines with Kurt Russell today. We have Skywalker Vineyards with Tom Johnson. We have Fess Parker, as you might imagine, with Eli is here with us today. And for those of you who don't know me at this point, my name's Tim Snyder. I'm the president of Fess Parker, and I'm just kind of going to be a little bit of a host and get out of the way mostly to talk, let these gentlemen talk about what they're doing. We have a Chardonnay from Skywalker, a Pinot Noir from GoGi, and a Syrah from our Rodney's vineyard at Fess Parker that we're going to taste today. But before we get into the wines, we've had a chance to all get to know each other and taste each other's wines and really see, how impressive these wines are. Just fairly recently, we all did a tasting together at the Disney Food and Wine event down in Anaheim, which was a hoot. But what it dawns on us is that perhaps some of you don't know what all of us are up to. And so I thought it might be nice to start by giving a little bit of a backstory on each of the programs and kind of what how they got started and what the essence of them are. And maybe Kurt, if you don't mind, we could ask you to start us off and tell us about GoGi. It's a great story, and love you to share it.
I don't know how many people who drink wine or got into winemaking or producing have the same story. Probably quite a few, but it is interesting how George Lucas and Fess Parker were involved in my life and how we kind of interconnected and how I eventually met all of you guys and just started having fun with the world of wine. My thing was pretty simple. I started doing, first of all, Goldie and I went on a bicycle trip in Napa. And it was my first experience with tasting wine, and I didn't know anything about I didn't know I thought you had to pay or something, in those days you didn't. You just walked up and they gave you a taste, and pretty soon I said, man, this is gonna be a lot of fun. Right? So she and I got to going, and the next thing I knew, my ass was in a cactus bush because I was fooling around with her on the bicycle, and we were laughing our ass off, and boom, all of a sudden I'm in pain. And we had a great trip, and we ended up saying, hey, you know what? There's these great bicycle trips, these Butterfield and Robinson trips in France and Germany and Italy and these great places. And they were, unbeknownst to me, they were all in wine areas. That was my introduction really to wine itself. And I kind of fell in love with the Burgundy area, as I used to put it with Goldie. I really like that Burgundy area. I think that's fun. She said, I think you like the wines there. And I said, yeah, that's true. So I started talking to those, some of those producers there and some of the winemakers. And I thought, God, that would be the coolest thing ever. I love these wines, but how do you do it with France? And it was years later. And I was doing actually a Tarantino picture called Death Proof. And I was right off of 246 there and doing some car gags with a stunt gal on my hood of my car. And I'm looking across at these vineyards and I'm thinking, I'm dreaming. I'm just looking, And interestingly enough, before that, I had, as the years went by, after I had met Fess Parker, when I was doing some Daniel Boone shows, as the years went by, it wasn't like we stayed in contact, but I was always surprised that he remembered me whenever I went up to Santa Barbara or something and ran into him. And he was just the coolest guy. I just really, really always liked him. And I got older, and then we started one time talking about wine. My mom and we were up there looking at the area, and I said, Mom, I think this is where Fess has his vineyard. Let's just, take a look. And we did, and sure enough, Fess was there, and we had lunch. He kind of got a quick lunch thing together, and we started talking, and again, just enjoying each other's company. But I was enjoying his life. I thought, this guy's figured it out. And I thought this would be something cool to get into. We actually started talking about that. And then later on, right after I finished that movie the next year, a man named Greg Gorman, who was an old friend, invited me to this thing called World of Pinot. I went up there, had a ball. I said, okay. And he said, look, if you want to get into this by the time you're 60, you better get going now. I was 56 or 7 at the time. And he introduced me to Peter and Rebecca Work of Amplos Vineyards. And they kind of grilled me, but they realized I was really serious about wanting to learn. I just wanted to learn. And I thought, you know, the more I can learn about this, you know, maybe this is something that I should do, because Fess had actually said to me, Kurt, I think you've got more than an interest in wine. I think you have a passion for it, and you should follow that passion. Anyway, to make that long story as short as possible, there was, you know, a million things going on in between. And there was even a moment there, you know, where I had talked to Fess about the possibility. He was going to help me kind of get started, try to figure some things out. Unfortunately, Fess passed away, and we had some opportunities to talk about things, you know, and I don't know, I just cherished my time with him. He was just an awesome guy. And I also love the fact that he was one of the first, maybe the first people to bring a helicopter in and out of Hollywood to go home every night, to get out of there, do your work, get the money, go live your life. And that was pretty smart, I thought. So anyway, that was how I got started. And Amplos Vineyard was Peter and Rebecca Work were like my mentors. I got for 4 years. I really I was at the vineyard a lot and in the winery a lot. And now I go back every other year to the Grand Cru, and I get to talk to those guys. A man named Albert Tesseron, who has Ponte Canet there. We stayed at his house, and you know, I got to Jean-Michel, his head winemaker at the time. He was heavily into biodynamics, as was Peter. And so then I started getting further and further into the weeds.
That's awesome. We cherished our time with Fess too. He really was a super guy. You know, and I think it's really interesting how these different paths cross, and how the relationships build and kind of go, you know, from one generation on, and they connect and they reconnect. And you know, I think that's fabulous. I love that story. I think it's great.
I have something.
A bike trip got you in deep, man.
Eli might know this. When I met Fess up at his place the year before that, Eli, you had become winemaker of the year, and so we were bragging on that. I don't know if you strolled by that afternoon. It seems like you did, but I could be making that up. However, I have the coolest thing, and it's this. I got this about 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't know how I got it. I don't know where it came from, but it's in our family, we were race car drivers, and participation trophies weren't allowed to go up. But I do have one participation trophy that I'm very, very proud of. It's not a trophy as much as it is this certificate. I don't know if you can see this, but it's from, I
love it.
It's from the Daniel Boone Society or something. And they send you this. This one was certificate of participation in the Daniel Boone TV series. This knife here came with it, is presented to Kurt Russell as Jed, Nathan, Paul, Matthew, and William. So I guess I did 5 of them. I don't know, Eli. But cool. That's my certificate. And this, I don't have really an office. I kind of have a semi-office in my bathroom of all places, but this sits in there. So it's a constant reminder of all things Fess Parker, and wine is certainly one of them. And Eli, it really is a great pleasure for me to get to be even, you know, sitting here with you and Tom and Tim and talking about wine, because I've admired you for a long, long time, man.
Likewise.
You know, Eli, so Kurt was saying that he was racing to get into the business before 60. Sounds like a familiar story for your dad when you and Fess kind of jumped into it. Fess was, if I recall correctly, I think he was 65 when you guys, exactly. It was really the two of you with your mom and with Ash, but you know, getting things started.
Yeah, it was kind of a period, at least from my observation, a period in life where most people I think would be thinking, okay, maybe retirement and taking up golf, but that wasn't Dad. You know, I always kid because he had like probably 2 or 3 windows of, gosh, I think I'm going to retire. And they generally lasted anywhere between 4 and 10 days. And then he drove himself nuts and had to find something else to, you know, kind of jump into. But my parents, you know, both of them had a passion for wine going back as far as I can remember. I know Ash and I, you know, always observed, you know, holidays, had a nice bottle of wine on the holiday table. And, you know, every weekend they loved their Wente Brothers Gray Riesling with, you know, some Eggs Benedict. And I think actually going all the way back to the mid 70s, they contemplated getting into the business, but for a number of reasons, it just didn't pan out. And then he stumbled across this beautiful piece of property in the San Ynez Valley, and actually, ironically, made the pitch that he wanted to retire to this piece of property, which Ashley and I both chuckled at. That was like, okay, we'll see what retirement looks like on this go around. But gosh, it wasn't more than probably 6 months later that, I think it was 1987 or 87, December of 87. By 1988, he was planting a few acres of vineyards, and 89, we had our first little harvest, and things have just kind of blossomed from there. It's been an amazing run. That we had a couple of years ago, our 30th anniversary, and boy, I'll tell you what, time flies. It's pretty amazing. And I just have to say, honestly, I like you, Kurt, have kind of I used to go hang out with my dad on the set of Daniel Boone, both at the studio and out at Fox Ranch. And you probably wouldn't remember this, but I think I was maybe 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And, you know, I don't know what our age difference is. I don't think it's that big of a difference, but I definitely remember, you know, seeing you at work and going, I know that guy. That's pretty cool.
Anybody can.
Yeah. And so I don't know. And then honestly, it's just really cool to be sitting here with the two of you, because so much of my life, you know, I loved going to the movies, and just, for God's sakes, the whole Star Wars thing was like, that was 1977. That was like, if you were wholly absorbed in that when you were my age, it was like, I think I must have seen that movie like 9 times or something like that. It was just crazy. So to actually be sitting here, you know, having a fun tasting and chatting it up like this is pretty cool.
You know, I don't know if there's much connection with Fess and George, but Tom, I like today, I got, you know, hey, listen, I'm ready, boys. I'm going to have I'm having some of that Skywalker Chardonnay. Yeah. I might have put a little GoGi in there and compare those two. I think that'll be fun. But I got some cool cheeses and things, which I love that. But I also have something that brings me to George. So one of my great passions is hunting, and I love to hunt elk because I love the meat. It's my favorite meat. So I cooked some up this morning, and I did it in sort of honor of you, Tom and George, because in 1976, I guess it was, I went in on an interview one time, Eli, you'll like this. And it was for some little space thing. I don't know. It was like, you know, these crazy names. And now I'm sitting with this very young guy who's really kind of cool and relaxed and talking. And I said, well, so wait, there's I'm sorry, Mr. Lucas, what the Death Star is what now? He said, well, here's the globe. Use that as the Death Star. Okay. And I'm doing, anyway, I did a test for Star Wars. It's kind of actually a YouTube favorite, I think, amongst some people. And I got into this fascinating conversation with him. He really was picking my brain about Disney because he was fascinated by Disney. And you know, sharing stories, did the interview, which was a blast. And of course, some other guy got the part. I don't know what happened there, but years later, actually, I went to George one time. At that time, I said, George, do you know if you're gonna like hire me for this or not? Because there's this ABC Western show that if you're not, I need to answer them. He said, Kurt, I don't know whether I don't know where I'm gonna go with this. You might be Han Solo, you might be Luke Skywalker, We could have been Tom, you and I, we could have been in business. And so anyway, years and years and years later, Goldie used to I'd go hunting, we'd have elk. And then on New Year's Day, kind of became kind of well known around where we lived in Colorado, just outside of Aspen, that Goldie made the great elk stew, and we just had an open house. And one year it was kind of a quiet year. There weren't that many people, and George came. And I got to spend the whole day. He had a ball. We talked about everything in the world, of course, except anything Hollywood. And I think at that time, he was just beginning to kind of like talk a little bit about wine, and we had a little bit of a conversation. Didn't go very far, but I was always fascinated by that. And of course, one of the things that, like I was looking, for instance, at this incredibly beautiful Christmas card. I'll put that up there too, which thank you very much for telling. Goldie loves it. So do I. But the invite from you, Tom, to come up there sometime to Skywalker and just see it. I just heard from so many people. Eli, Tim, I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity. I'm going to take advantage of it at some point because I've heard it's spectacular. But anyway,
I'm waiting for my invitation. Hopefully it's in the. Yeah, we moved a couple years ago, so maybe I'm not sure. But I'll tell you what, as a native Marin County kid, I grew up that way. What you guys are doing, Tom, is pretty pioneering in that area. I mean, Marin was still today is fairly, is less recognized for its ability to grow and produce fantastic grapes and wines. You guys are obviously turning that on its head in the Chardonnay that we have today that we'll get to here in a moment, proves it. But tell us a little bit about, what you're doing in Marin, why Marin? Well, I guess he was in Skywalker Ranch, was there before the vineyard, but tell us about the program.
Sure. No, it's a pleasure to be on this call with everybody. And again, I wish Tim and Eli, you guys are invited anytime. Let's do this tasting in person next time when the world opens up again. But I'm a native Sonoma County guy, born and raised, sixth generation, and worked for my father in the wine business back in the day. And that's the last thing that I wanted to do, was be in the wine business. And so I left it and then came back about 20 years ago, and I'm absolutely honored to be here specifically. I was tapped about 6 years now to come talk to these guys at Skywalker Ranch because they were doing something with wine, and this was after the sale to Disney, where George sold the intellectual property to Star Wars, but kept all the physical property. And so we have this gorgeous 6,000 acre ranch that only has about 5% built on, but the ability to raise cattle. We have 150 head of Wagyu beef on the property. We have about now 37 acres of planted vineyard in Marin County. And being a bit of a wine country snob, growing up in Napa and Sonoma, how good can Marin County wines be? I ordered the wines during the interview process and was pleasantly surprised about what they were doing, and took the meeting. And it's been history since. 2014, we started and built our own winery to have everything estate bottled and produced here at the ranch, because that was important to us. We really wanted to control the quality. Like you were saying, Tim, there isn't many wineries. There's about 17 labels in Marin County, where Napa and Sonoma have over 300 in each county. And over right now about 300 acres planted of grapes in the whole county. And we have 37 of those. So we're a big player in a very small pool, but we're making some really great wines. What we found is that we're focusing on cooler climate varietals, things that you'd find in Burgundy. And we're really excited to kind of do that. Each year we have improved with the investment that we put in to make it. So I see, Tim, you have your glass there. So the wine.
That's our signal.
It's time. I can't wait longer. I
already started
before. This is every bit as fantastic as I remember it to be. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing there.
Yeah. So growing Pinot and Chardonnay only. We pick this Chardonnay in November every year. It's much later in the harvest period.
Wow.
All the Chardonnays off the vines in Napa and Sonoma in September usually. Yeah. But we pick a little bit of sparkling wine grapes in the September time, and then leave the rest on the vine here to create this type of Chardonnay. This is our reserve level Chard, and it is done in the traditional California style.
Tom, what is the weather pattern in general during the year?
So we are 20 minutes off the Golden Gate Bridge. So what you hear about San Francisco and the weather and the cooler Junes and Julys, we're pretty much like that too. We get fog coming in from 3 different areas between the coast and the San Pablo Bay and different areas that it does cool down quite a bit, but it doesn't get as cold as San Francisco necessarily. But the diurnal temperature is the same and doesn't really fluctuate like it does in Napa and Sonoma. And so it stays pretty consistent. So you get a very mature, ripe grape when it hits the sugar levels that you want. So the skins and the seed are 100% mature when we're picking them at 23, 24 degrees Brix. So we do that, but we make this wine a little bit differently. I drink many different types of Chards, but I'm a little bit over those big, heavy, over-oaked Chardonnays. So this one we do a little bit differently. So we ferment it out with the first fermentation. We put it in oak and let it sit in the oak barrels for anywhere up to 14 months. So it does have quite a bit of oak. But one thing that we did here when we built the winery is we built this huge walk-in refrigerator that we can pallet jack or forklift in these barrels and cold stabilize. This is maybe getting a little bit too wine geeky, but cold stabilize the second fermentation so it doesn't get buttery, and those acids that go from the appley acids actually kind of get pineapple-y. And so you get this very tropical flavor. We stop that fermentation and kind of leave it kind of midway through. So if you like the big buttery oaky Chards, this isn't the Chard for you. But if you are liking almost that crisp lemonade, tart, really interesting Chardonnay, it's absolutely phenomenal. So this is one of the ones we really enjoy.
I think you're right. And to me, it has an old world character, right?
Absolutely.
It has that elegance, breadth on the palate, but it's really lifted and bright, and that acidity that you're talking about shines through and carries the wine. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. This wine I have in my refrigerator at all times. It's always my drink after work. It's great with
So
first.
when we do come and visit, you'll have it ready for us.
Okay, done. We'll drink out of the tank.
Perfect.
It's a really great wine, great for the holidays as well. And if you have someone that you're gifting it to and they're not a big Chardonnay fan, they're still going to enjoy this one. So, and it actually ages a little bit as well, which we're interested in.
Sure that everybody can see the label here.
Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about the label as well. That there is something that we only make anywhere from this wine. We only made 350 cases, so very small. We have a small allocation list and a small website. But when we were producing the wines for the first time, George is very involved in everything from the bottle and the cork and the label. And when we were producing this reserve level wine and our wines were getting better and better and better, we asked him what he thought the label should be. And we have on there this beautiful winged icon that we chose for it. He said he's had this in the back of his mind for all these years to use on something special. And he felt that the wines would be something that we can really have this special logo mark on. And when he was writing 4, 5, and 6 in the 70s, he was kind of envisioning what Luke Skywalker was going to be. Was it going to be a male? Was it going to be female? Was it going to be Kurt Russell? Who knows? And at one point he saw this statue, and it was a young man, looked untested and untrue in his face. He had bare feet and a walking stick, and it kind of clicked for him that the wanderer of the sky that's going to come in and save the universe would be his lead character. And so he just had that in the back of his mind all those years. And when we released the wines, he had us come up with this sketch for this label. So our reserve wines will always have this beautiful winged icon. And then our everyday wines that we make are going to have the logo mark of the winery. So it's something very special. And we only produce 200 to 300 to 400 cases each year of the different wines with that special label.
You go straight to stainless steel barrel with this, or are you in?
We'll ferment in stainless steel, and then we'll lay it down in French oak. And
for how long are you in the stainless steel, and how long in the French oak?
Stainless steel is only usually about 3 months, and then we'll go into French oak anywhere from 12 to 14. We try to use new with a little bit of used oak.
Are you doing natural fermentation with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you said you were cooling it down and you could control, because we run into that. We work with it. Really,
I'll tell you, it soaks up new oak quite well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oak is very well integrated.
Yeah, thanks.
It kind of reminds me, from a palate weight standpoint, of some of the wines, some of the Chards that you're making. Same with you, Kurt. I mean, Santa Rita. And what's interesting is kind of, Tom, how you're talking about that there's, sort of maritime influence, if you will, coming from multiple directions in Marin, that's very similar, at least from a conceptual standpoint, to what's happening in Santa Rita Hills too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
It's interesting. I was listening to you talk about the weather, and I was asking because the first year I was with Peter and Rebecca, and I'm really, I mean, it's like I'm drinking from a fire hose here every day. And I'm sitting underneath this beautiful oak tree that they have. At the end of the day, we'd always finish there and take some bottles of wine up there and finish the day out. And early on in that experience, when I'm looking over at the hillside toward the west, and man, the smoke is just piling over the mountains. I mean, it's racing down the hill. And I'm looking at this behind Peter, and I said, man, they got a hell of a fire going on over there, Peter. And he said, where? I said, right over there. And Rebecca and Peter looked at each other and they started to laugh. And it was way too fast for it to be anything else. And they laughed. I said, what? And he said, that's not smoke, that's fog. I said, that fog coming in at 25 miles an hour. And they said, well, that's what makes this area unique, because it cools down from like 85, 92 during the day to like 57 at night within 45 minutes. And so that grape's just shutting down and opening up the next day and shutting down. And I got into that conversation. But as I'm looking at it, I said, man, that's incredible. He said, well, yeah, he said, have you ever heard of sea smoke? That's why they call it that. And I said, man, it looks just like smoke coming down the hill. But it was that same kind of thing. It's the same, that shutting that grape down with that cool air, and then it warming up the next day and filling up the volume, and then the nice breezes. I'm sure you get those nice breezes that come in and knock the must off. Yeah. And that's a nice thing. I'm comparing it right now to. So
it's something that we really enjoy. It's something that, again, there's not a playbook. Pioneer is a perfect example of kind of what we do around here, what George has done in all parts of his business. Not afraid to kind of take the risks to try to do something and make it better, which is why I really enjoy working for this winery and this brand. One of the things that we're also doing when you were talking about kind of the weather is that we've also started 2 new brands, one in Italy and one in France as well, where that's an absolute snapshot of the region and the area. Our Italian property has it's interesting. It's a lake influence right off of the Lake Trasimeno in the heart of Italy in Umbria. And then we're in Provence for our French brand, Chateau Margaux. And the weather there, we're kind of hidden in this back valley that it's its own little microclimate versus the rest of the Provence area. It's just really unique. And so each wine is unique and different to its region and an area.
You guys spend time, I mean, this is probably a silly question to some, but do you guys spend time going over there to like pick brains and compare notes and go, you know what I'm saying? Compare sort of regional aspect of the grape, of the juice itself. You guys go over and talk, do you?
Yeah, we do. And what's great is that we've kind of hired the best winemakers in the region there to really kind of grow specific fruit for that area, not necessarily the big cabs and the big shards that are going to kind of, fit the bill. But, in our Italian property, we have an old monastery from the 1500s that we've converted to a space for people to come in and stay, and built a state-of-the-art new beautiful winery and allowed the winemaker to plant whatever he wanted. And he chose 5 ancient varietals that the Romans would have planted. I can't pronounce half the names. And it's a unique blend of what that environment and what that area would have grown back in the day. And we have this Chili Jolo based wine that's a wine that would normally be blended into Chianti that is so unique and different. We just got the wines over here in September that are absolutely phenomenal. And again, he's using kind of the regional influence, not necessarily just going after what's going to fit the portfolio.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Eli, tell me that it's not cool too to hear all the Star Wars backstories, right?
Oh,
how George Lucas was, envisioning Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, actually knowing that, Kurt had those conversations with Mr. Lucas early on, I'm sitting here looking at this label and I'm looking at him and I'm going, all you need is a pair of wings, man. You're
Hey, You know, it's never too late, George.
Yeah.
I think that maybe he realized that perhaps he made an error judgment.
I don't
And
think
so
George
now you're on the label.
No, you know, it really was funny because he was telling me, hey, you're in the running, man. I just don't know where it's going to go. And I wasn't going to pass $7,500 a week up. You know what I mean? It was like, I'm in. George, I'm going to go do the Western. He said, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as long as it wasn't leading to Chewbacca, you know, that wasn't a stepping stone somewhere, right?
Tom,
Well, let's
just
shift
say
gears.
This is great.
I just wanted to say congratulations. This is a beautiful wine. I've been sitting here just like, you know, it's really well balanced. I mean, nice marriage of fruit and acidity and oak, and it's really pretty. I'm enjoying this. I'm glad you said 2 bottles because I'm going to drink the rest of this one today, and I'm going to drink the other one for the holidays.
There you go.
I'm going to recommend Green Apple, a nice Smith here, and some Mackick Cheddar.
Ooh, very nice.
Darn, I wish I had been on my game and prepared a little like that. That would have been good.
I know. Yeah.
I have to say, when we first got online, though, for a second, I thought that was a lime and that we were going to do a tequila shot at the end of the tasting. So I wasn't sure what Kurt had going on there. But.
Yeah. No, but it's true.
The apple's safer.
I don't know about you guys. I love drinking wine. I'll drink it alone. But for me, I don't know. How about you guys? I've always had a difficult time with wine scoring. I've done well with it, and that's always a nice. It's always, you know, it's important, I think, and I understand the value of it. But it's difficult for me, and it always has been, because certain wines pair so much better with certain foods, and that taste or that scoring system I would totally understand. I mean, I have some elk here that I'm going to taste with when we get to the Pinot. Because that was one of the reasons I loved Pinot, was I love drinking Pinot with elk meat.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I really not like this one. It is full body. Love hearing you talk about going from the more full oak, the buttery oak Batard thing, which I still love, to a more crisp, clean, a more modern Chardonnay. Did you make a more buttery Chardonnay at first and then go to that? Because Peter and Rebecca kind of got me off that train.
Yes and no. It's something that we're fairly new as well. We've been growing grapes since the 90s, but really kind of gotten seriously about 12, 15 years ago. And so every time we were experimenting with different things. We make an unoaked Chardonnay as well that is basically just lemonade in a glass. It's amazing at a great price point. And then we did this one, and every year we were kind of testing it to see. And for some reason, these grapes, we have very low yield, but these grapes will almost get too buttery, too over the top, almost like theater popcorn butter coming out of your glass. And so we've pulled it back now that we have control of what we can do with our own winery. We've really been testing everything out. We're testing different forests for the oak. We're testing, how long in oak and the secondary fermentation process. So we're really getting to kind of play to find out just what exactly Marin County grape growing is going to be like. So.
Hey Tom, do you hold any of those unoaked Chardonnays, or do you give them any age before kind of going down the Chablis path, or do you bring them to market kind of on the earlier end of the spectrum?
We're only making anywhere from 150 to 200 cases, and it's usually a pretty quick release to get it out there, and sells out within the couple months that we get it there. But we have some older ones. We've only done it for 3 years now, and some of the older ones are tasting really special.
I was just going to say, the structure of this wine makes me feel like you ought to lay a few of those down and start peeling them out at 5 and 10 years, because I bet you they're going to be absolutely beautiful.
I have a problem aging my wines in general too, but I think that would be really good.
So you find yourself,
take that recommendation.
You find yourself generally picking around 23, 23 and a half, 24.
Yeah, for that. We're also really, we used to sell some of our grapes. We still sell some to Schramsberg Vineyard, which is one of my favorite sparkling wine houses around. And their past winemaker is now our winemaker as well, Keith Hawk. And he's taken on some high-end clientele when he retired from Schramsberg. And so we have Keith as our winemaker. we now make a reserve level and a everyday Blanc de Noir sparkling wines that are phenomenal. And so when we have this conversation in a few years, I'll be able to talk about how Marin County and sparkling are going to be the leaders around, because we do pick those at about 17 degrees Brix. But again, about a month later than Napa and Sonoma. And then we'll let the Chardonnay stay out to about 23, 24.
Eli, I see Eli smirking. I was like, I got into that. You know, I met Raj Par, and we got listen. You know, and as the years went by, Raj was getting into making wine and whatnot at the same time, and he really likes to pick early. I know that for his Pinot. You know, he likes that. You know, really.
Yeah.
Well, we're blessed to be able to grow fruit in areas where you can get that good physiological ripeness and still maintain great acidities and
Minerality.
works.
Good stuff, man.
Kurt, can you talk about some Pinot in Santa Rita? By the way, the Southpaw, I love it. I love the story. It's a homage to your son, yeah?
It's my stepson, Oliver Hudson. I name first of all of my Chardonnays every year is always named GoGi. I do that every year. I donate some of the proceeds from the sales to her Han Foundation for her. She has a Mind Up program that has now it's really affected positively and changed the lives of millions, like 10 to 15 million children around the world. And I'm very proud of that. But I love doing that, and I love learning more and more and more about Chardonnay. I used to drink white wine, then I kind of got off of it, and I only went to red. And then I found after time I kind of started liking the Chardonnay a lot again. Yeah. I love the learning experience that I've had with the Chardonnay with Peter and Rebecca. But I have to say, in my heart of hearts, even more is I fell in love with Pinot Noir. I'm a total Pinot poodle. I love wines. I love the Tuscans, for instance, those big the Ornellaia, Sassica, all the Ayas. I'm a big fan of that, and Italian wines in general, the Bordeaux's. Yes, love them. However, there's just something for me that happened with me with Pinot Noir. I just absolutely love it. In running into Peter and Rebecca, I realized early on that they were doing something for me that I didn't understand at the time, and that was they were trying within themselves, because they make a slightly different, well, quite a different style, in fact, Pinot. They were allowing me to try to get to learn how to get the Burgundian style red that I wanted to make, and again, those weather patterns there are what created that opportunity. And it's my personal belief that the Santa Rita Hills area is, well, I'll be honest, I think it's the second best place to make Pinot in the world. I've had the opportunity to go and try different wines from all over the world, New Zealand and Chile and Argentina, and I mean, you know, you name it. That's the one great thing about being an actor is you get to go places and talk to people that otherwise you probably wouldn't get an opportunity to do. So I take full advantage of that, especially when it comes to Morton, and especially when it comes to France and the Grand Cru. So getting an opportunity to spend some time with those guys. At one point, my first vintage was 2008, and I named it after my son, Boston. Or I named that particular vintage. I had to come up with a name, and I'm thinking and I'm going along, and I'd done this movie called Tombstone. It was a Western with Val Kilmer, and he's playing Doc Holliday, and there's a scene where he's drunk and playing with this thing, and he says, and he's drunk, and he's in vino veritas. And I, at take 17 or something, I said, Val, what does that mean anyway? But he says, in truth, wine, or in wine, truth. And I remembered that for some reason. And then now I'm making wine. And Peter one day says, you got it, Kurt, you need a label. You can't just put it out. Well, it's not, I wasn't planning on selling it. I was just making it for me. And he said, but you need a label. And I said, he said, you need a brand, a name. Okay. I've got it. Veritas. That's it. And so he said, yeah, well, you and about 1,000 others, right?
Yeah.
So there I was trying to find, finally, he said, you got to do it quickly. So I said, I don't know. You know what? I'm going to call my first bottle Bosty Boy, and I'm going to dedicate it to him because he's the one who really showed me that it was Pinot Noir that I liked. I didn't know that. And I dedicated to it. So I said to myself, well, you know what, if I'm going to go with his nickname, I might as well go with my nickname for the brand. So GoGi, which I thought at the time, I'll keep this very cool. I'll never tell anybody what it means. That lasted about a week and a half. So, so GoGi is my nickname growing up when I was in my my original family. And it was originally Go-Go, but my sisters turned it into Goginski and GoGi. Nutsy, for instance, my sister Jamie, who runs the operation, right, with Bob Love, my operation. So anyway, I said, well, okay, I'll you know what, I'll call it GoGi. It's kind of French. They'll mispronounce it. They'll probably call it GoGi or Go. And I like that. I always liked it when people mispronounce the French names of wines. And I thought that's a good thing. I like that. And they do mispronounce it. They call it everything but what it is, GoGi. And so every year, my vintage is named after a different family member. And there's generally a nickname that goes with it. So I've had Bosty Boy, Angel Baby, Jilly Bean, 3 Bings. There are 3 Bings in our family, my father, my niece, and my grandson. So that one, but it always connects up for me, which is what I love about Peter and Rebecca. I didn't speak wine. I spoke in terms of baseball or movies or women or men, boxers. I would, I just say, well, this is like, I really like this, but this is like, you go on a date with a really pretty girl and there's not everything is, she's really nice and, she's having a great time, but the next day you can't remember her name. And I said, what, that in wine terms, that to me is you're missing gravitas. You're missing a bass note. You're missing 4, 5, 9. So that became to me the game that I loved so much is not only when you pick, we usually with the Pinot there, we're somewhere around 24 and a half bricks. But the we take the seed and bite on that and find the crunchiness and find the pulpiness of it and the and the taste and the color, and then go down a couple more rows and put them in the baggie and throw them up and see what you get for and see what you've got for bricks. And it generally, when the mouthfeel and all of that goes together, is when we pick, and then you go through all the fun of making wine. But blending day, to me, with Pinot Noir it's the coolest day of the year. I mean, I love Christmas, don't get me wrong, but blending day with Pinot, to learn of the 52 clones, to learn as many that you really understand, that you have a taste for, and then the chess game of putting the right amount with each other, the right percentages that changes every year. The first time I made the first bottle of wine I was really impressed with. So was Wolfgang Puck, by the way. And I was like, because I gave it to Greg Gorman because he had gotten me with Peter and Rebecca. And in the process of going up to this thing that Greg was doing, this showing of his of his artwork, I ran into Wolfgang, who I'd run a few times, and Wolfgang said, "What do you got there? What's in your hands?" And I said, "It's my first bottle of wine, Wolfgang." And he said, "That's nice." And we go in and we give our wines. I got a bottle there for Greg. And then he realized, he says, "What do you mean your first bottle of wine?" I said, "Well, I actually made this wine." And he said, "You made this? That's fantastic." He said, "Give it to me." Now, I had bottled it about 3 weeks earlier. So, it's please, right? It's my first bottle. And I'm now there's suddenly there's a lot of, this is an artistic world. Suddenly there's all these people who are very, very savvy in the world of wine too. And I'm realizing that, oh my God, it's over before it starts. And Wolfgang pops, boom, grabs his wine key, which I still have, by the way. And he pours, and here they come. And he pours a little thing, and he goes like this, and he pours a little, and he gives a little for himself. And this is exactly what he did. He went, "Well, let's see what you did here." He walked away. He walked away with the bottle and the glass. And I said, I'm going to take that as a good sign. And he came back about 20 minutes later and he said, "Kurt, this wine is terrific." And then he wanted to know about it. he actually carries the Chardonnay. It's popular in some of his other places. And from that moment on, I kind of felt like, you know what, this means something to me. This just means something to me. And so I continued to each vintage name it after my children, my family members and whatnot. This is Southpaw. And Southpaw is after my stepson, Oliver Hudson. He's a left-hander. And my other world professionally was baseball. And all Southpaws, they just have a different way of doing things. They have a different way of throwing the ball, especially pitchers. And Oliver, like all of them, was a terrific athlete. But every left-hander I ever hit against, all right-handed hitters will tell you, and left-handed hitters, but right-handed hitters especially can feel it. They all have a different action on their ball than right-handers do. They all turn the ball over slightly. The ball just moves generally late on you, right around 50, 55 feet. And the ball moves, and that's what gives those left-handers that movement. And so when I make these wines, it's whatever family member it sort of reminds me of for whatever reason. Like I was saying earlier, Three Bings. It reminded me of wines that we had done. It reminded me of wines that I wanted to do. And I said, this is the wine we got. So this is the now, this is the present. And I said, well, I got Three Bings in my family. I had my father who had died. And I said, that's the past. My beautiful niece, Bingy, who I said, that's the now. And my grandson from Kate, Bing, Bellamy, and Matt Bellamy, that's the future. And I said that's an easy one. Like I said, the Chardonnays every year are GoGi, crisp and fun and just full of life. And so this Southpaw is that left-hander. This has as you get into it here, what I love about this is I always like to try to keep the elegance of what I think Pinot Noir should be. It must be elegant. You can't be a lightweight trying to be a heavyweight. And I loved that at the end of this, and I'm trying to remember back when we were putting the clones together, and I think it was the last edition of Pomard that gives it it's just about to finish, and it has a little thing on the end. And I said, that's Lefty, that's Oliver, that's a Southpaw, and so that's why this one's called Southpaw.
That's awesome.
And I love it. I do think that the Santa Rita Hills region, AVA is a fabulous place to make Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. You can make the Burgundian style. As we all know, there's a great audience for and a great love for California Pinots that are big. They're big. I just think it kind of reminds me of what Chardonnays, Tom, you were talking about, Chardonnays used to be that butter. And I love that. I like big batards. I mean, that's fun. It's smooth. It's easy to, it's a lot of, but I think that refined and crisper is better. Likewise for me, I have a little bit of a thing against big Pinots. It's supposed to be elegant. It's the complexity of Pinot.
Kurt, I don't mean to step on you. I'm really glad that you got into the wine business when you did, and you got to skip the entire late 90s and early 2000s.
I was just thinking that. Kurt, Eli can tell you, can pile on this conversation, because I mean, that evolution is exactly, I think you were doing a lot of that too, Eli.
Oh my God. I mean, I remember literally for a while, these Pinot Noirs were like Zinfandel. And frankly, even though it literally violated every kind of, like, you go to market and people are like, well, what is this? It's not Pinot Noir. And I know, no, this is Pinot Noir. It's like, well, it's too light for us and there's not enough oomph. And I'm like, well, if you want Zinfandel, buy Zinfandel. It's like, anyway.
If you want to get lost in the complexity of what these different clones have to offer in a single drink of wine, get lost in the complexity of what Pinot can offer. And that's a great trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I have to say, honestly, I was kind of tickled when I heard you talk about your sort of enthusiasm and how much you love blending day. And sitting here tasting your wine and thinking about the, you know, the last 30 years of at least for us making Pinot Noir. I remember when we started back in, you know, the early 90s, first, just finding Pinot Noir down here that you could acquire was a hat trick. And once you found some, you know, if you were lucky, you got a little bit from the Miller family over at Bien Nacido, or Sierra Madre Vineyards it was always Pomard clone. And I remember when we first planted our vineyards out in Santa Rita Hills, and we planted, you know, 113, 114, 150, just a, you know, whole host. And I remember the first time we had, you know, a meaningful harvest off of those vines, sitting down. And it was, to me, it was like, okay, for the last 7 years, we've been trying to create, I'm going to use an analogy, a piece of art, and we have one color to work with on the palette.
There you go.
And all of a sudden now we have
speaking about Pinot that way. That's my language.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to say it at the time. It's so great to hear you say. I'm feeling good about myself right now.
Totally get it. 100%. It's like, wow, look at all, I mean, we've got flavor and we've got color and we've got all this, and we have to figure out how to put it together in a way that, you know.
Don't you think? I mean,
definitely.
You know, I mean, it's like flying. You will never learn it all. You're not even close.
Yep.
When you think about it in your lifetime, if you get to make, let's say, 60 vintages, you lived a long life as a winemaker. I mean, you get 60 shots at it.
Yep.
And to be able to find that groove. I was driving down the freeway one time, headed back up to the vineyard to see Peter and Rebecca and talk to Peter about, we were getting towards blending day, which also there's some fantastic information there about biodynamics and what biodynamics mean to it. For instance, one day we're tasting and I'm tasting, and I walk off and I've got, you know, because you got 7 or 8 bottles out, you got 7 or 8 glasses out there with, you know, 150, 100% 115, non-oak, 100% 115, 50% oak, blah, 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 459, 28, 2A, 777, you got all out there. And you're going to find the right, you know, find the blend that you want, that what works well together. And I'm driving up there, and all year long I'd begun to, because of your tasting, your barrel taste. In my case, I at the time was barrel tasting probably every 4 to 6 weeks. And I started getting this in my head, you know, it's like, I kind of like that 2A, like a lot of this. She's really elegant. That's really nice. And the 459 is really deep and strong. That could be a nice, and blah, 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 blah. It's going in my head. And I'm starting to get this little idea that by the time blending day came, I knew what I wanted to do. So right out of the box, and I got 4 or 5. My sister was there, Peter and Rebecca, some, you know, some cellar rats are hanging, you know, we're all, right off the bat, I hit, Peter, let's just try 20%. Let me start with the, you know, the 45%, 115. 115 is kind of my base. To me, that was the first clone I learned. That was the first, it was like a kid in school with a ruler. Rebecca had the ruler going, that's not, you're wrong. And finally I got 115. I could get, oh boy, I got that. And that became sort of my base. That always represents, to me, the heart of Pinot Noir for some reason, for me. I can work around it, right? And right off the bat, I said, this percentage of this, that, and that. Put it together, and everybody they said, wow. And I said, Peter, what's that going to be in a couple of years? What do you think? We had that conversation. Now I said, well, okay, so we need to keep going. We did about 12 other blends. So you're keeping the blends in your head that you've done to mix with the new ones and you're coming back. And everybody said, oh, the 12th, that's what, yeah, Kurt, wow, that's GoGi wine. That's the deal, man. And I said, great. I said, now let's go back and do the first one again. And that was the blend. And I said to myself, hey, buddy boy, you're starting to get the idea. You're getting it. What you wanted to do years ago. you should relish this moment because you're starting to get the idea. You may not be great at it, but you're working your way there. If this continues to mean this much to you, you're working your way there. That was a seminal moment for me with wine. It was like, all right, starting to get this.
It's awesome. I'll tell you, I'll just say one thing. If the wine is absolutely gorgeous,
It's beautiful.
and I think it really captures the essence of Santa Rita Hills, that elegance that you're talking about with depth and complexity and structure. It's just, I mean, it's fantastic. And I'll just plant a seed with you before we move on to the Syrah. If you're looking for a French word to be mispronounced, you should think about adding Viognier to your portfolio.
Oh no, I make a half a barrel of Viognier.
There you go. It will be mispronounced.
And on the website it says, Viognier is available, but only for Kurt's mother. My mom loves Viognier, and I make it for my mom. And Oplos, I make a great.
You guys are saying it wrong. You're saying it wrong. It's Gagner.
That's one where I do the celebrity thing, which I can't stand, of just slapping my name on the bottle, right? So Peter makes a great Viognier.
Oh yeah.
For years and years and years, I do a half a case, and my mom, who's now 92, and hiding well from COVID.
Oh, good.
She's it's interesting. I think she's kind of moving off of Viognier slowly, maybe into something else. I don't know what, but for years and years and years, I made that. I claimed the Viognier for my mom, which was, and I love Viognier. A good Viognier.
That's fantastic. That was Marcy. That was Eli, my mother-in-law, Eli's mother's go-to. If we had Marcy and Fess coming over for anything, we had to have Cold Viognier. If we did not, it was like a mad dash to go track it down because you had totally, screwed up all planning. But, Eli, you've been growing Viognier next to where we've been growing Syrah for a long time. Maybe we could have you, as we move into the last wine, talk a little bit about this is all from Rodney's Vineyard, the home ranch. Maybe, you were the driving force behind a lot of this and really forging the style of this wine. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, full disclosure, I'm going to continue to enjoy the wines from Skywalker Ranch and GoGi because the bottle of Rodney's Syrah that was sent to us was mistakenly consumed prematurely for a dinner. We love my wife, but didn't realize that was supposed to be for anyway.
Well, at least you've had it recently.
Exactly. I'm going to
got it right here.
Recall.
You can definitely tell, from a color standpoint, which is the Syrah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So, we in the early years, we sort of struggled, learned, spent a lot of time talking to folks that were in the business, in the business in our area, and we knew that we had, some great possibilities with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. At the time, we were principally in the Santa Maria Valley, and for us, our sort of foray into Santa Rita Hills didn't happen until a few years later. But we were, we have this beautiful home ranch where the winery is located, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what can we plant on this piece of property that, will thrive and that, we can produce some great wines. Others were trying in the early years, you had people trying to make a go of it with, the Zinfandels and Merlots and Cab Francs and kind of the whole Bordeaux set. And some people are doing fairly well with those if you're further east in the San Ynez Valley. But we got some really good advice, I believe, in the early years of our program. We had a winemaker that we were working with back in the late 90s, early 2000s that really felt that the Rhone varieties were, kind of where things were going. And so we took a little bit of a a gamble and decided to really kind of stake our claim with Syrah. There were a few others locally that were doing it at that point in time. We had Coupe, who was, they were doing a great job with Syrah, and GoGi Vineyards, Adam Tolmack, but it was it at that point in time principally used for blending, and so we started experimenting with Viognier and Syrah and some of the other Rhone varieties on the home ranch, and quickly discovered that, this was really a great location to grow these varieties for a lot of the same reasons, Kurt, that you were talking about, and Tom. End of the day, you're never going to make a great bottle of wine if you're not growing the grapes in the right location. That's 80% of the battle. When I was more actively involved in winemaking, I might have taken a little more credit than only 20%. But the reality of the situation is, it comes down to great fruit growing in the right location. And a lot of those, stories about, and it's funny because I have recollections of sitting up on the top mesa where most of our vineyards are planted, watching that fog work its way all the way up, the valley, and literally you could almost set your watch by it during certain times of year. You just kind of knew that by 5:30, 4:30, 5:30 in the afternoon, you were going to have the overcast come cool everything off. Next morning, fog rolls back out at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and you got beautiful 80, 85 degree days. So we're just blessed with being able to grow fruit where. Go ahead.
Is this considered, because I know that Peter and Rebecca make a cool weather Syrah, which I've had some experience with, and I'm loving. This is, by the way, this is nice, man. This is really nice. This is mellow and good. Is this? But would you call it a cool weather Syrah or not?
So I wouldn't necessarily peg it as a cool weather Syrah. I mean, I like to kind of consider the home ranch sort of halfway between, kind of Santa Rita and the easternmost reaches of the San Ynez Valley. Yeah. So we're much cooler, for example, than Paradise Vineyards way out, when you're coming down San Marcos Pass. Yeah. I think we still have some of those, nice sort of peppery notes and the concentration that you get from sort of those slightly cooler growing region. But, this wine is inspired by some amazing wines that we tried kind of in the early years from Australian producers, and spending a little time in the northern part of the Rhone Valley. And I'll never forget, we kind of had a clue that we were onto something back in the early 90s. I think it was 92. Robert Parker came to visit and wanted to taste wines out of the barrel, and he was going through and making notes, and everybody was, kind of watching with bated breath and trying to figure out where, and so reviews finally came out, and he actually reviewed the 92 vintage in the barrel, and he said, this is actually one of the finest Syrahs in the region, and I think this wine is going to be an amazing wine as long as they don't screw it up. And I remember thinking to myself, God, if that doesn't put a little pressure on you, I don't know what does. But
here you go, Eli. Don't screw it up.
Excuse me, Mr. Parker. What would you consider screwing it up?
Well, I'll tell you what. It's interesting. In the early years, we were truly, everything was an experimentation for us back then, frankly. I mean, we had so many different barrel programs and different fermentation regimes and different yeast strain. I mean, it was just a complete experimentation. And I think the bottom line, by 92, we had started to kind of close in on it a little bit, and we were learning from our previous mistakes. And
were you taking sections of the vineyard, Eli? Were you taking sections of the vineyard and sort of, okay, here's what we're going to do with this, and this, because of where this section is, we're going to do this. Were you doing that? I mean, because you guys got some pretty serious space out there.
That didn't really start in earnest for us until a few years later. Back in the early 90s, we basically had a single clone of Syrah that we were working with. You know, we were doing our best to just farm the fruit, you know, as thoughtfully as we could, and, you know, managing yields down. Syrah has a tendency sometimes to be a little prolific. And so we were just trying to, you know, make sure that the fruit that we brought in had, you know, good backbone and nice fruit flavors. But really for us, the experimentation that you're talking about, Kurt, started in the late 90s when we developed Camp 4 Vineyards, which was sort of in the Santa Ynez Valley, many more clones of Syrah and some of it own rooted. And so that was when things really started to get fun.
How much of that, I guys, again, I don't know how much time we're going to burn up here, but maybe it doesn't matter. I don't think some guy can edit this together, but I'm having a lot of fun. Damn good wines. I mean, that's a nice afternoon or morning.
Absolutely beautiful.
You know, Eli, how old were you? Because how much time were you spending at what was becoming the vineyard? How old were you then? And when did you start saying to yourself, how did you say to yourself, or when did it happen that you went,
yeah,
I'm going to find out about this. I'm kind of interested in it. And then where did you go? And I mean, you got great at it. So there's a process there. What was yours?
So I, in the late 80s, I was in my late 20s, and I thought I wanted to try and make a career of selling real estate in the Santa Ynez Valley. I was working with the local real estate broker, and my parents decided to start the winery. And frankly, we moved into another sort of period of economic decline, and wasn't making much money, to be honest with you, selling real estate. So I would just go out and help, you know, drive the tractor and, you know, kind of just be a set of hands wherever I could, and worked with the winemaker at the time in the cellar, cleaning tanks and cleaning barrels and sulfuring barrels. And I did that for a couple of years.
Cellar ratting.
Exactly. I started to really fall in love with it. Frankly, going into it, I had really no idea that this would ultimately become kind of a passion for me. And so that persisted for about 3 years. And in 1992, right after the harvest of 1992, my dad decided to make a change on the winemaking front, and he fired the winemaker that had been with us for 3 years. And I found myself in a kind of an interesting situation where, in the interim, until we could hire somebody else,
wow,
I had to keep the barrels topped up and, you know, kind of
all on. I can see Fessing. Eli.
I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea what's, you know.
I'm not worried about that, honey. Eli knows how to do that. We'll be fine.
That was a stretch to anyway. Just through luck and a little persistence, we managed to make the acquaintance of a gentleman named Jed Steele, who had formerly been with Kendall Jackson and then left KJ and started his own wine company called Steele Wines. We tried to hire him as a winemaker, but after 6 months of trying to entice him, he finally said, you know what, I don't have time to be your winemaker, but you seem to have an interest in the business. I'll take you on and mentor you for 3 years. And if you haven't figured it out in 3 years, you need to go back to selling real estate. So,
hey, Tom, I got to tell you, one thing I remembered. When this is done, I'm going to remember 1,000 things that I wish I said.
I was just going to say, this is the first in a series, because there's a lot of meat on the bone out there, right?
When I was doing Death Proof, the Tarantino movie, I kind of got bold, and I went down one night for the sing-along, the Thursday night sing-along at the inn. And what was it, the Fess Parker Country Inn? What is it called?
Wine Country Inn.
Wine Country
Inn.
Which there'd been this battle. I'd talked to Fess about. There'd been this battle, which being libertarians, and I can freely say that about your dad. I know I never like to pigeonhole anybody, and I never talk politics in public, but I'll say what I am. And Pat Fess was a libertarian. He wasn't a Johnny-come-lately libertarian, and neither was I. and he was having this battle. And I remember that. And then finally there, he got to build the end. I think he was going to build it somewhere else, but anyway, that's another story. We'll do that next time. But anyway, go to the, and it's Thursday night, and it was just so much fun. Tom, I wish you could have been there. And then I got very bold, and I started bringing quite a few of the crew and a lot of the, they had, it was a glimpse into how fun life can be. And your mom every Thursday night, and and how your dad, how Fess enjoyed how much fun she was having. I don't care if you guys would have made the worst wine in the world and would have been a total failure. It would have been worth it just for that. It was enlightening. It meant a lot to everybody who went in there. It was like, she was a chanteuse, and here was this situation. I don't know. Did you, Tim? I'm sure you did. Obviously, you Thursday nights. I mean, it must have been. You had to gaff the whole thing, no doubt.
Well, I don't know if you probably don't remember this, but one time we were there when our youngest son Henry was small.
I remember.
And you had just finished doing, or we had just watched Miracle recently, and we're like, "This is Coach Brooks." And Henry's looking at you like, "Nah," and
I don't think so.
You said, "Well, what?" And you kind of lean down. Went, what about this? And because you had more weight during the web.
Yeah.
Pulling your face out, Henry goes, "Oh." Yeah. So it was amazing. It was a great,
that whole thing to me, when people talk about, when you listen to wine people get into the weeds, okay, I get it. That's what wine is.
Yeah.
That Thursday night sing-along if you understand that, then you can understand wine and what you'll get out of it and what you'll enjoy with it, whether you make it, produce it, or just drink it. It's nothing more to me. There's nothing more than that. It's just that, can you put that feeling into a bottle? And if you can, you're contributing to something great to the world and something memorable.
Yeah.
All about good friends and good food. And, it's,
you guys could be chewing up some of this tenderized shoulder.
I'll tell you, that elk with the Syrah has got to be a good.
It's fantastic. It's great.
Eli, I have a question for you. How's that 92 tasting now? And should we lay this down? This is a 17, right?
One of the things that was really, really fun, in the early years for us, Tom, people would, try our Syrahs and they'd say, well, how well will this wine age? And, when you made a 92 vintage and it was 1995, I'd say, well, definitely 3 years, but beyond that, I'm not. We went back, we've on several occasions now actually had these fun retrospective tastings, and we pulled some of these Syrahs out that are 20 plus years old and they're still drinking beautiful. Wow. I mean, they obviously, some of the, not every vintage, kind of holds up as well as, but on the main, I'm really, really happy with the way the Syrahs are standing the test of time.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. I don't know much about what goes into the making of wines outside of Pinot and Chardonnay. Learning a little bit late, about the Syrah is beautiful. What I know that with Pinot, one of the things I love about organic farming, biodynamic process, the process of making wine, right, and the reality of the thought process, which goes from woo-woo wow, come on, woo-woo to, wait a minute. For instance, I was telling a story earlier and I didn't finish it. It was like, I was tasting one day and I just said, man, I don't know what's wrong, man. Every clone tastes the same. They're not bad. It's just that they taste the same. I can't delineate anything. Rebecca walks away. And I'm thinking, what is this? This is bad. Because I got to get up from Los Angeles, spend a couple of days, come back down. It's, it's not that easy sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and now I'm worried. It's like, oh God, if I finally run into the bad year or, what is, she comes back and she goes like this. Well, she had the phone. Yeah. She goes like this. She's got her phone with an app and she goes. And on the app is a biodynamic tasting. It was the worst day to taste wine of the year.
Interesting.
The next day was one of the best. But she didn't say that. I spent the night, the next day, so we blended. And it was like, well, this is good, I think. I don't know. Next day, we went back, started fresh. Right off the bat, you boom, a couple of things, little change here and there. I said, this is fantastic. And she puts it was one of the best days. And that was happening. And Jean-Michel at Ponte Canet we were talking about the differences between the lifespan of the calendar, the death cycle, the life cycle. These things begin to matter. But the fact that when you get into sustainable practice, I'll tell you what, that stops you from making shortcuts. And what I like to know about Syrah is, do you find, is it true? If not, it's not. The less you manipulate the wine, the better chance you have of it aging extremely well.
I think generally speaking, that holds true. I will say that Syrah is not as delicate as Pinot Noir by any stretch of the imagination. And sometimes, frankly, a little bit of, especially in the early years, a little bit of roughhousing with Syrah can actually sort of be beneficial, to be very honest with you. But within reason, it's just one of those grapes that, it can at times be pretty sort of reductive and tight and just, it needs a little bit of air and a little bit of kind of awakening. And so, what, from my perspective, there's no right or wrong. Every wine, every lot of wine that you produce is its own kind of like living, breathing, and you just kind of got to follow it, and it takes you down the path that it needs to take you down.
That's why a vintage is what a vintage is.
Yep.
Well said.
Hey,
Well,
Eli, I have a question for you, Eli. I worked for my father and then left. Loved him, libertarian, strong. How was it like working for your father, and what are some of the good arguments that you won?
Oh gosh. Well, I got to tell you honestly, it was just probably one of the most amazing things to be a part of a family business and to have a dad that, frankly, for him, I think that was probably having Ashley and I involved, the family, and then later the next generation. I think for him was probably he would say one of the greatest successes of his life. I will tell you, one of the biggest battles that I probably won in the 20 some odd years that we worked together, I decided at some point that I needed, for my own identity, to start a second label and to do some things and focus on a particular category of wines, specifically Rhone wines. And he did not understand at all that desire to sort of go out and kind of deviate from sort of the focus of the Fess Parker brand. I think ultimately he understood why and appreciated the wines that were being, and we're still making the wines from the Epiphany label, under the Epiphany label, but he definitely, that didn't sit well with him for quite a while. And so that was, that was a tough challenge, to be honest with you.
Well, the student had become by far the teacher, I'm afraid to say. I mean, I think Fess probably, is it true to say, would it be fair to say that Fess started a business? You made wine.
Yeah, very true.
Difference there. Yeah.
Another cute little story that, when we started, both Ashley and I, there was just generally a concern that, we wanted to be recognized for what we were doing in the wine business. And we lobbied heavily for, and ultimately Dad decided to go along with the idea of calling the brand in the early years just Parker Winery. And that lasted for about I don't know, 12 months. And after, I don't know how many thousands of people going out into the tasting, they go, why in the heck are you Parker Winery? Why aren't you Fess Parker Winery, for God's sake? There's like 40,000 Parkers in the phone book. Which one? So he finally, I mean, I think he enjoyed rubbing that, rubbing that.
I have faced that for 12 years now.
Yeah.
And GoGi Wine makes it on its own legs, or it doesn't.
You know what? It really, honestly, for us, I mean, it took years and years and years to kind of get away from the stigma of, well, what's another actor doing getting into the wine? How can he possibly be serious about it? And
in those days, he was one of the early ones.
Yep. Exactly.
Nowadays, the double-edged sword it's not even a double-edged sword. Mostly it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with it. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. And
you know what? The difference is you're in it because you have a love and a passion for it.
It's fun.
You get into it just because you think it's a cute marketing idea, and there's another.
By the way, if I was going to name anything, I wouldn't put Kurt Russell's name on it. That ain't going to help you.
I don't know. I doubt that, but
yeah. Skywalker, you're fighting the same battles though.
I was going to say, what about that, Tom? What do you say with that?
We deal with that all the time, and again,
Sure.
we're here in Napa, Sonoma, and every race car driver and basketball player has their name on something. And again, I had that mentality when I first came here, and to see what we've invested in and the quality that they're trying to do here, and to find the best of the best, it turned me around. I worked for some amazing wine brands in the past, and this one here, to see everyone's level of commitment to build the best Pinot Noir, the best Chardonnay, something unique and different. I'm honored to be a part of it. I don't know, kind of where we're going every day. It's a different path because we're continually changing and evolving and pioneering. And thankfully, it's all been in the right direction. Kurt, question for you: what is the wine legacy that you're going to leave? What is GoGi in 5 years, 10 years?
I know, that's amazing. That's exactly what Peter Work asks me every time we see each other. What do you want to do? All I ever wanted to do was I wanted to learn it, and I wanted to be part of making a fine wine. And then I got to say, I really want to be a part of making a memorably fine wine. You keep crawling a ladder. I think I'm a little bit like Eli in that regard. I was just coming from a place. I don't know, I go back and forth on it. Look, let's face it. Nothing would be greater to feel right now than to know that 250 years from now, somebody's drinking a glass of GoGi that is in the Latache Richebourg category, and they're saying, you know where this started? The guy was an actor. You know what I mean? And I would love that. I would love that. I also think of what Eli's saying and what you're saying, and looking at George and both those fellas, and the fact that they made their name in something else. Certainly for me, I mean, GoGi, yeah. But in looking at the history of wine, you find that many great wines started from either the fathers, the padres, or somebody who had a lot of money and had a passion for wine. And if there's anything I would wish for, it would be to have more money to be able to do more of what I love. You know what I mean? I wish I could do that. So I look at that and I go, I don't know, just years from now, it'd be great to know that. It'd also be great to know that one of these bottles 60 years from now was opened and somebody just had an experience that they've never had before. Some people have met in first dates and they got married and they're on the first date, they had GoGi wine and they're part of the wine club. They're part of the wine club and they talk about this stuff. We have I love my wine club. I love the people in it. I love the party that we throw for them. I'm sure you guys love your wine club members. I mean, there's something special about a wine club member. There's one thing that's special about a GoGi wine club member, and that is they all love GoGi. That they drink GoGi. that's their Pinot. And love that about them. I fight every year to try to create the best Pinot I can possibly make. And now it's partially for them. I love to do all the things in my life that I love to do because I love to do them. But I must say, when it comes to making wine and being with Peter and creating it, I have them in mind. I don't want to let them down. I want to give them something where they go, oh, wow. And my most current vintage, Aaron, has done that. They to a woman and a man think that this is the best that we've made so far. So those pleasures, what do you want to do? That's what I want to do. I want to do that. I just want to be able to have done that. I mean, does that sound, I don't know, is that
nice, nicely said? Absolutely. One thing that I love about wine, and it's, we're all storytellers. You're a storyteller in front of the screen. A bottle of wine, when you open it up, tells the story of that year, that vintage, that property, that everything. And I love the fact that each year it can be different. The Syrah it's opening up. It's amazing. It's
great.
So congratulations.
For me, from my apples and cheese and Skywalker Chardonnay, a little bit of GoGi thrown in there, I cooked a little elk this morning to have with the Syrah and with the Pinot. What a beautiful morning. Thanks, guys. I thank you very much. I can't wait to see you. Listen, we're in an interesting time, that's for sure. But I really do. Tim, thank you. Thanks very much for posting and putting it.
Well, we've been talking about it, and so it's been great to finally get it together. And like I said, it feels like there's still a lot of meat on this bone. I think we're going to have to do. I think there's more to come. It'd be great to do some in person when we can. Maybe
I want to go to both of the vineyards and drive them crazy. I'll burn their ears out in an afternoon. I'll tell you that.
There we go. I love it. Well, happy holidays, everyone. It's been a pleasure. It really has been sharing stories and sharing time. Good health to everyone. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. And we'll keep in touch.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Great being with you.
Likewise.